Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. For this latest episode, we're turning our attention to salmon and the River Moy, the Grilse run on Ireland's most prolific river set to begin in earnest in the coming weeks. Paddy McDonnell is one of the most experienced guides and fly casting instructors who covers the Moy and the Northwest region, and he joins us with some insights into the different aspects of the Moy system and tips on how to fish it. Plus, we delve a bit into the why rather than just the how of salmon fishing. But before we hear from Paddy, now, Tom, I know you're a brown trout angler, obviously, but you've never actually fished the Moy, which isn't a million miles from you there.
Yeah, I think you're a bit shocked at that. Yeah, I haven't. I've been up there plenty of times. I've never fished it. I suppose my thing is always trout, and any salmon fishing that I do tends to be on the lakes here. I did a bit on the lake here, and I like Ina and Kylemore, the lakes in Connemara. So I haven't done a huge amount of river fishing for them. Now I keep meaning to, and of course my excuse is that I'm always busy. So that's my excuse. But yeah, I've had chances, and it's on my bucket list to do. And I wouldn't be, it was really interesting talking to Paddy there, because that there's so much more fly water that I wasn't hugely aware of. But even I'd be willing just to go up and try it with any methods, with the spinning or the worm, as it's done on places, because
don't say that now. Don't say that.
Just try it. No,
Jesus, bless yourself. I haven't said that.
I know this is Ireland on the fly and everything, but yeah, no, just to get to fish it. But yeah, I would love to get a look at more of it. But yeah, it's on the bucket list, and as you say, it's a really close bucket list.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, my bucket list is Greenland, Alaska, and New Zealand. Yeah. Well, here's the Moy across the border.
Listen. If you're going to have a bucket list, have a few simple ones on it. Really, if you've cheered an oak in your bucket list, it's seriously never set the bar too high. And by the way, actually, while I'm on to you, I meant to say this to you. You're going to hit one of those bucket lists. You're going to Greenland.
Oh yes, actually, yes. I'm going there in August, so 2 months and counting.
Wow, I am very jealous.
I cannot wait. Arctic char.
Yeah.
It's I can't wait. And I'm actually thinking of bringing, I don't know. I'm in two minds. I was thinking of bringing the Zoom recorder, to actually record what it's like over there. But then the other half of me thinks just fish it, and this is actually,
enjoy it.
Yeah. And this is actually I'm going to go off on a tangent here. My biggest gripe, and I think I said it to George McGrath. I don't know whether it was at the fair or on the interview.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing now of anglers that we have to be out recording everything, whether it's a GoPro, whether it's a microphone. And it actually, did you see the PGA, US PGA? Did you see that picture of Tiger Woods? There's a brilliant picture doing the rounds. Tiger Woods teeing off in the US PGA, and there's the usual crowd of whatever 100 behind him in the gallery.
Yeah.
Every single one of them is there with their phone, and there's one guy standing right behind them, no phone in his hand, just holding a can of beer, just watching the golf ball. And this is we were saying, and it's a bit like that. I think it's like suddenly we have to be always, recording, doing whatever. And I've been tempted to, and it's the one thing I actually make the point of when I do go fishing is I do not bring the recorder. I did it once on the Drowse, and it's just, you're worrying about the levels and the mic and the cables, and it's just like, I actually just threw it in the car. Got so annoyed at it.
Yeah, no. What I would say to you, here's the thing now. Bucket list is 2 trips to Greenland. First one without the Zoom recorder, and second one with the recorder. But no, I'd agree with you. I mean, even the odd time, because I do done articles, having a camera in the boat and having to take pictures, it really just throws you. Where the focus is suddenly on as you said, getting right couple of pictures, making sure I have that. Yeah. Whereas when the focus is just the fishing, that's what you want.
Now, at first, I don't mind with the phone. I'll always have the phone on fishing and just take a picture. I always take a picture, of fish caught, just for my own record. And I love showing the boys. And then I also just take a picture of the river and the conditions, because it's always my kind of, at the end of the month, when I kind of need to write in the diary of my fishing trips, I use my phone as the record. I go, oh yeah, I was on the shore on Friday, whatever, and this is what it was like.
Yeah, it's a good way of keeping them, and you can just check the time and everything.
Exactly. But that's it. I don't know. But then I'm thinking, I'm going to Greenland for 9 days. It's maybe one of the days I'll do it. Yeah, I'll think about it. Be a great episode.
Yeah, it would be absolutely fantastic. Yeah, more for it if you're up for it. But yeah, but anyway, see, and it's good. Like that, there's a really high place bucket list, and then which I have Greenland there as well, but I also have the Moy, and back to him. And after chatting about, he was really interested in chatting to him about taking him spring salmon, and that we have to keep bit of a mind on conservation. And he said for future generations. So yeah. He was very thoughtful and really moved by his most memorable fish.
Yes.
Very moving. Yeah.
And actually, if everybody could keep listening out to, and if you haven't noticed by now, kind of our last question to each guest now is what's their most memorable fish? And I love all the different stories that we've been getting. And Paddy's one, I wasn't expecting it, but it was.
No, I wasn't expecting, but it was very moving. But it was good.
But sure, look, let's hear from Paddy McDonnell now to get his insights on the River Moy. And I first asked him how the season has been going so far.
This year, it's been, I'd say, a particularly poor enough spring run of salmon this year. But it has been sort of a downward trend with the spring salmon over the last number of years. And this year has been quite slow. Now, there's been an improvement recently. Whether that's just the tail end of the spring run that used to be or not. But there's a slight improvement the last 7 or 8 days, So it's been this. Whereas there's been fish caught and it's been, in patches it's been okay. Overall, I would be put down as relatively poor season so far.
But we're coming into the kind of the main run now, the Grills run, the next few weeks.
Really, we're still in the for the likes of the Moy anyway. You're still in the main spring season into the first 2 weeks of June. There's the odd grills have started to run the last couple of weeks, and that will gradually build through June into July, But there's still a couple of weeks left in the spring salmon season.
And in terms of numbers of anglers out, how's it been?
Yeah, quite a few anglers now. There's a lot of anglers. It's been a big rebound after COVID or whatever, So there's probably a lot of pent up demand, and just glad to get back out again.
Is the Moy your home river, so to speak, like?
Yeah, the Moy, So, I suppose years ago when I started guiding, I spent nearly half my time on the lakes and half time on the river. But the last 15 years, I've nearly spent all my time in the rivers now. I miss the lakes a good bit, but
not this May, Paddy. Not this May, Paddy. No, seriously, Paddy, not this May.
I was actually up in Cornamona for a day this year. I got away for a day, but the Moy is sort of my home river and its tributaries, and then we have 6 or 7 other salmon rivers within a short drive of us here. So except for the Newport River, they're all spate rivers. So a lot of them don't start to get their fish until July, sort of July, August, September. So for the whole season, we sort of have somewhere to have a go at anyway. And it's good because sometimes when the Moy is in flood, it means the rivers are at a good level in the spate rivers. So there's a good sort of variety and a good backup for people that come. There's always something else to do. We can go to one of the spate rivers, or we can go trout fishing in the lake, or we can go fly fishing for pike, or we can go fly fishing in the sea. So there's always a sort of a backup, especially we'll say if you get very low water conditions or whatever, and there's always something else we can go at,
And is salmon the first grow for you, Paddy?
It's a question I get asked an awful lot, and I cannot pin it down because I can't say I have a favorite really. I was out up in the Doris. As Tom knows, I was a member at Cornamore Club for years, and it's my favorite spot in Ireland for fly fishing. For trout. It's such a beautiful place. So I was up for a day there, and the conditions were. There wasn't a huge hatch of mayfly. There wasn't a huge amount of fish up, but we came on a pocket of fish. I was out with Kevin Crawley. We came on a pocket of fish feeding. There was a little hatch of mayfly just out to the needles, and there was a pocket of fish feeding on them. And we had a reasonably good day, So we had, I think between us, we had 17 or 18 fish and wets. And the days before that and after that then were very hard going. And even on that day, if you didn't happen to be in the right place at the right time, it was patchy enough. But that's just the way it is with wild fishing. It's not going to be perfect all the time, and it's very locked into hatches, and that type
That's
of
the
thing,
story. That's the story exactly the way it's been. You get lucky one day, Paddy, and the next day you wouldn't be lucky. But just back there, Paddy, where are you from? Where was your local water?
So my local river is the Moy for salmon, and my local lakes really are Lough Conn, Lough Cullen, you know. They'd be sort of the main. Now we've a few other smaller trout lakes, but Lough Conn, Lough Cullen would be the two, my two home waters for trout fishing as such, you know.
And then the Moy for salmon. So you were
on
the Moy for salmon,
and also some of the tributaries, the Moy, the Guistion. I fished the Guistion quite a bit for salmon years ago, and there's a couple other. See, the Moy system is unusual in that it's quite a big system because you have the two lakes feed into the Moy, and you have a salmon river. The Bellevire River comes off Lough Cullen, and you have the River Deal, which comes off Lough Conn. So the Moy really is quite unique in the way that it's almost like three separate types of salmon rivers in one. So, downstream from where the lake water comes in, it's a lake-fed river, and that means really that the salmon, stay in a taking mood for a lot longer, and the conditions stay good for longer. And whereas the higher up you go up in the Moy, it becomes more of a spate river, where the level goes up and down very quick. The more you head up towards Bannon, up the top of it. So it's quite a big system overall,
How many, roughly, how many miles would you reckon of fishable water there is?
Okay, so I suppose if we're talking about fly fishing, so you have the beats in Bellynea, which are, 2 or 3, the pools, the Cathedral Pool and the Ridge Pool or whatever, Spring Wells, Ashley Pool. But then I suppose that the majority of the fly fishing water would be upstream of Foxford and East Mayo water, where they have about 9 miles river in East Mayo, and there's probably 6 to 7 of that is fly water,
Would it be that much, Paddy? You see, I'm. This is great. I'm really enjoying this because, I've never actually fished the Moy, so I wasn't aware that there was. Yeah, I haven't. Do you look?
Yeah, there's loads and loads of really nice fly water on East Mayo.
Yeah,
and it's there's 90 name pools in East Mayo, and there's a lot of nice fly water in it for sure. Yeah. East Mayo is unusual in that, the one of the main tributaries of the Moy comes in about halfway down East Mayo water, the River Guistion, and it's also like two different rivers and different levels of water. But below the River Guistion, the river stays up for an extra couple of days because of the River Guistion, and upstream of the river
goes down lower.
It's more spacey. So, and that's just in the East Mayo Angler stretch alone. So it can be quite a variance of where you can fish on any given day, depending on whether you're fishing on East Mayo above the River Guistion or you're fishing below it.
Right. And another thing, actually, I heard, and this is because I'm going all by hearsay now, but that from the different tributaries and let's say you'd be able to tell where a certain salmon is from in the Moy. That there's different shapes. I've heard this, that there's different shapes of salmon, that there's some of them that are short and thick or from a certain tributary, or let's say the Guistion or whatever, and that there's other shaped salmon. Is that so?
Yeah. There would be, sometimes you could tell, but even, I'm sure Dr. Paddy Gargan, we have at least 6, if not 7, distinct strains of fish comes up the Moy. So you have the fish that comes, the early fish that comes into the River Deal and the Bellevire River, and then you have the fish that go up the Guistion. So you have 3 other rivers after that. You have the Glore, the Pulla, and the Trimog. You go up then, and you're in the Mullahoe, Charlestown River. You have the Clare River. So there's a lot of distinct.
So all those rivers that you just mentioned there. Yeah. Can you fish them?
No, so some of them are like the likes
spawning, spawning headwork.
Now even the Pulla, now it's actually possible to catch salmon and the likes of the Trimog and the Pulla in June, because salmon, some early fish to go up into those rivers, because I've caught them trout fishing there in May and June. But usually they're regarded as sort of nurseries, and no one would fish them specifically for salmon. Now the Guistion is a salmon river in its own right. You can legitimately go after salmon on the Guistion from once you get into June, July. It's got a little bit overgrown the last few years or whatever, but so then the Curry River gets its salmon. They run up the Curry River later in the year. You wouldn't be fishing that for salmon river. So
Right.
yeah, there's at least 6, maybe 7 different strains of salmon go up the Moy system. And I'm not even mentioning the Bunreed. Like the Bunreed in Ballina has its own strain of salmon that go up there. They go up that river very late as well.
Where is that, Paddy?
That's downstream by the Ridgepool and Cathedral. It's right in the tidal stretch. Yeah. The Brusna, yeah.
But come here, that other river that flows in below the Ridgepool, Paddy.
Yeah.
Can you actually fish that one?
I think it's closed at the moment. I haven't fished it now for a good number of years. I have a feeling that it's actually closed. I don't think it's even open for catch and release at the moment. I think it's possibly closed at the moment.
Right.
No, I'm not 100% sure, but I have fished it in the past. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so it's obviously it's a fishable piece of water.
It's a fishable piece of water. Yeah, for sure.
And another thing then on the Guistion, is the Guistion open or is it private, or is it day tickets, or what's the
the Guistion in itself and all its tributaries are all free fishing.
Are they?
You get quite a few guys going up there trout fishing or whatever, and that's free fishing.
Paddy, I was just wondering there. I remember a couple of years ago that the average size of the grills seemed to go down. They went very small on the Moy.
Yeah.
Remember that? Like they were going, like you're getting grills at 3, maybe even 2 pounds. Was that?
Actually, that has sort of nearly disappeared there for the last 2 or 3 years. There's hardly any small grills. Like the last couple of years, the quality of the grills was as good as I have ever seen it.
All right, really, so they've actually just come back to
There was always a proportion of those small little 2-3 pound grills or whatever, but the last couple of years I have to say the quality of the grills was outstanding, and a lot of grills in that sort of 5-6 pound bracket, nice with occasional 7 pounder, and a very good quality grills. That I have a sneaky suspicion that the grill stone of the Moy is gradually improving over the last 4 or 5 years.
Do you?
I do. I have that sort of feeling that it is gradually getting better. I'm seeing pods of fish coming through. Years and years ago, you'll see pods of grills coming through all day, little groups of 10 or 12 grills going through. Right. And I hadn't seen that for years, and I'm beginning to see that occasionally some days now again. So right. I do get that feeling that at least holding their own, and maybe the run increasing slightly.
Well, that's really good to hear. And with regards like the smaller ones, do you have any idea what that was brought about? Why did the size plummet? Is there any notions or ideas?
Historically, there was draft nets and there was drift nets or whatever. So like a lot of the fish that were getting through were the smaller fish that could actually get through the nets, because the drift nets and the draft nets in the river were catching all the fish above that size. So that was a sort of a problem.
Paddy, can I ask you? You think of the Moy, and you think of the Ridgepool, Ballina, that's the kind of the focal point of it, and is that kind of what people kind of come to want in terms of for me it's a bit odd, I think, in the sense of I'm chatting to a fella there and he's catching a fish, and next minute you turn around and there's a crowd watching. It's a different type of fishing, isn't it? Like
there's a very and the whole scheme of things and fly fishing in the Moy, the Ridgepool and Cathedral is the smallest part of it, really, because the vast majority of fly anglers are up fishing upriver. Like the Ridgepool can accommodate 5 anglers, and the Cathedral, I think, 7 or 8. Like you could have 35, 40 guys fishing in East Mayo fly fishing on any given day. You know,
Wow.
so you have a lot of scope there, a lot more scope, and a lot more fly water. Whereas some people like to fish the ridge pool and Catilla, and when the river, we have very low water conditions, we have a drought conditions. Well, then, you know, that's a very good place to be. You know, the fish can sort of get held up down the estuary, and there's fish coming in out of the ridge. So it's all down to conditions as well, you know. And some people like to fish the ridge pool because it was famous or whatever, historically or whatever, and just to say they fished there or whatever. But and some people don't mind fishing in the town. Other people want to fish out in the countryside where they have a more peace and quiet. It's very much down to individual preference as well, you know.
It's kind of iconic though, isn't it? Like you can't, you know, when you hear the ridge pool, it's a bit like Galway Weir, isn't it? A bit like that.
Yeah, well, I suppose you know, the ridge pool, you know, it's government run or whatever, and you know, it has been probably got more promotion than other clubs might have got upriver or whatever, you know. So.
And what about Ballina? Like, there's a real sense, like, is the Salmon Festival going to be happening there again this year?
It's hard. Yeah, the Salmon Festival ran for years and years. There was a very big event, and I'm not so sure. I haven't heard. Are they going to start it up again? With COVID and everything, everything is probably knocked back or whatever. So it's been nice to see the festival in Ballina going again. Also, they had a very good festival in Foxford on the Moy. As well, and hopefully that one in Foxford will maybe get up and going again. So yeah, at the moment I haven't heard anything, but hopefully that both festivals, Ballina and Foxford, may well start up again to be really good, you know.
There's a real kind of, I get that sense of like kind of, it's like a culture fit, you know, in terms of salmon in the area. It's something that they're really trying to sell nearly as a kind of as a destination, isn't it? Now I know obviously it's in visiting anglers' minds, isn't it? They just associate their salmon, that's the region for it. Like,
yeah, well, like you know, I'm based in Foxford. I used to work with Maloney's Lodge in Foxford, and like every morning there or whatever, it's like the United Nations. You have people from every country in Europe and from America and you name it, from all over the world, and yeah, so it's quite well known internationally, and we got a lot of international anglers, fly anglers coming to fish in the Moy and fish the local rivers, and I actually fish Lough Conn and Lough Conn as well. And they'll come and they'll stay in Foxford and or Ballina, whatever, and they'll fish Conn, they'll fish the Moy. They might go up and fish the Corb for a day, and they'll fish the Mask for a day. So some people just wanted to concentrate on salmon fishing, some people trout, and some people like a mixture. So it's you know, it's down to what the individual clients or guests want to do, you know.
Did Jack Charlton help at the time?
Yeah, I actually knew Jack quite well. I used to meet him fairly regularly in the ridge pool, and he was a real character, you know. And I suppose he brought another level of interest, you know, people that would have no interest in fishing or salmon fishing sort of took an interest just because Jack was in Ballina or because he was in the ridge pool or whatever. So it was it's sort of the two linked up quite well, you know.
And he used to come over every summer, did he? Like when
Jack had a house in Ballina, you know. So, he had a house for quite a while in Ballina, and he was in there quite a bit, and he loved his fishing. So yeah, it was sad to see him pass away or whatever. And you know, he's very well taught around Ballina.
Yeah, no, 100. And I think it's great to see when you have public figures like that, isn't it? Like kind of espousing an area, you know, and that they, like say they have a holiday home. It just creates that kind of awareness.
Anglers get a draw for a place. They get a liking for a place. Like, so some of my friends from down this part of the country, for years and years, Tom knows us, for at least 20 years in a row, we went to Cornamone every year. We had a week or 10 days fishing there. And you get a draw for the place. Like, and you know, as I said, I got a day away this year to fish, and some of my mates are still going there to this day. They have their week's holidays in Cornamone, and they fish after doors, and you just get attached to a place, and it's the combination of the fishing and the beauty of the place and the people and the atmosphere. It's more than just the fishing as well. It's a complete thing, you know. And
that's what I get that sense. It's that kind of cultural thing, you know. You're coming to his place. But I remember at the same time when I went down to Cornamone fishing with yourself, you just got that sense of it was in the blood around. It was in the air, you know, the air like there. You know, the people were soaking it up, like. You know?
Even the people, like, it's the same around, you know, Foxford, Ballina, Swinford, on the Moy. Even people who don't actually fish themselves have an interest in it, or they're always asking what's the fishing is like, or whatever, or the fly is up, or what's happening. So it's in the genetics of the locality, if you like.
Well, it's so important to a locality in a way, Paddy. It really is. It's so important, and not just. I don't mean that in economic way.
That's right, yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. It's a feel good factor, because there's guys coming to stay, and they go to the local pubs, or they go to an Irish music section or whatever, and actually make friends with people that aren't in the locality that aren't even into fishing or whatever, just from the sheer fact that they're coming year on year for a long number of years to sort of nearly become like they become part of the furniture almost.
Yeah, there's a classic case here. I don't know, the week that you used to come, the week beforehand, the Welsh lads used to always come, and they got so caught up with the locals here, the guys who don't fish, but every year they have a darts game in Wales.
Yeah.
So the O'Malley's team will go over and sometime in October and have a darts game against their local pub in South Wales.
That's right.
That's really good. Yeah, really good.
Them boys used to stay out in Roisin Bay, near Roisin Bay, wasn't it? Yeah. Well,
they used to go out from Peter Welch's place.
Yeah, because my mates, I think they were in the same place this year. So we're launching out of Roisin. It was very handy, So
you were. They did stay in. Yeah, they did, and they were there the week before you, I think.
Yeah. It's a lovely spot.
Great spot.
Yeah.
Paddy, tell me, in terms of the guiding side of it, how did you get into it?
Well, I suppose I started off when I was very young. I suppose it was just people just asking would I take them salmon fishing, or would I take them trout fishing, or whatever. And I sort of started off when I was a teenager, and did it sort of. I'll be taking chunks of 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, bringing them people fishing here and there at different times of the year. And so I did that for years and years and years, and I was always self-employed, so I could organise my other work around doing that. And I suppose about 20 years ago, I then sort of went at it properly,
So you're full-time?
Yeah, yes, for the season, yeah.
Wow, that's and how have you found it in terms of in terms of trying to, if the fishing's poor or patchy, how do you find that in terms of trying to get that balance right, in terms of
I suppose with experience, I suppose I remember when I was younger, I would be, you get very frustrated on the guest part or whatever, but as you get older, you become more accepting of the conditions. So you fish to suit the conditions to the best of your ability, and that's all you can do. That's all you can do. So whatever method or whatever technique or whatever tactic that suits the conditions best, well, then you go with that, and whatever happens then, because you have no control after that. All you can do is sort of remove any obstacles that might be in the way of someone maybe being successful, and then all you can do is fish. And if you're successful, great, and if you're not, well, that's wild fishing. There's no circle around it. So what can be frustrating for visiting anglers, maybe that might be used to fishing for stock fishing in rivers, or stock fishing reservoirs or whatever, where they're maybe used to, fishing for rainbows or whatever, which are obviously hungry all the time. When you're fishing for wild fish don't exactly, operate to the same code, and that can be quite difficult. But, when you gradually explain and want to get a full understanding of what wild fishing is, then they either like it or they don't, or whatever. Some people just like fishing for wild fish and whatever, and some people it doesn't suit. But at the end of the day, once you sort of have your tactics sort of right, then whatever happens. That's all you can do. And you squeeze whatever enjoyment. You can have a very enjoyable day, salmon fishing or trout fishing, and maybe not catch too much or whatever. Because there's other things you can learn. Because a lot of the people I have are sort of beginners or intermediate, so you're all the time teaching fly casting technique, you're teaching fishing technique, and it doesn't have to be a wasted day just because you don't get to fish. You're trying to pass on knowledge or skills or whatever to somebody. So it can be they can learn more in a day when they don't catch anything than a day that could catch 3 or 4 or whatever.
Actually, Paddy, just that you said you do quite a bit of instruction, don't you? You do a lot.
I teach fly casting every day. 99% of my work is basically teaching fly casting, because in salmon fishing, fly casting, well, it's in all forms of fly fishing, casting is important, but it can be really important in salmon fishing because we're fishing bigger flies a lot of the time, and we're having to cast slightly longer distances and cope with very difficult conditions, and sinking tips and sinking lines. So it's a big change for someone to change from single hand casting to double hand casting, and it's there's a lot of things change.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you get away with it. Let's say lock style fishing. If you've reached a certain level, then it's going to get you through 90% of what you need to do for lock style fishing. But salmon fishing, it's completely different. And
so if you take salmon fishing with a single-handed rod, so you can, in a lot of rivers you can fish, and even medium-sized rivers you can fish with a single-hand rod. If you match it up, with the proper type of line, something like, we'll say OPHT Commando heads or something that are really condensed and cast really well, you can command a lot of river with a single-hand rod. Your technique has to be that little bit more refined. You have to be able to do certain things. You have to be able to haul really well. But overall, really and truly, I suppose, to cut a long story short, salmon fishing really is a fishing for a two-hand rod. There are some situations where you can fish quite well with a single-hand rod, and some certain conditions suit that. But for the vast majority of your salmon fishing, double hand rod is the way to go. And even in spade rivers, a double hand rod is the way to go, because you take somewhere, we'll say like the Owenduff, we'll say it's a small spade river, and a lot of the fishing is done off the bank, but you come across obstructions in the bank. If you have a 10 foot single hand rod, you physically can't get in there. Some of the pools you can't wade. And whereas if you have a double hand rod, you can reach over and you can fish those pools, or you can overhead cast or whatever. It gives you more flexibility. So all things considered, really, 99% of your fishing for salmon is double hand fishing. And most people have to bite the bullet and say, okay, I really need to learn how to cast with a double hand rod,
I have to say, actually, like Tom would notice, like my preference would be for salmon fishing, and part of it was just the casting.
Yes.
Because 99 casts out of 100, you're not going to be casting. But for me, standing there, just watching the movement of the line, and it's kind of maybe akin to hitting a nice golf shot where you hear that ping, and
absolutely,
you're watching it like,
absolutely. So because the one thing about fly casting with a single hand rod or double hand rod is that there's a certain level of pleasure to be got out of just doing the thing very well, and there's lots of different casts we can learn and or whatever, and as you say, even a day where you don't get your fish, the pleasure of just being able to wade down a river and cast a nice line and cope with difficult conditions, and there's a certain pleasure to be got at that in its own sake,
Yeah, exactly. And I think in comparison to, say, Tom, the brown trout fisherman, where you're trying to figure out the problem of the flies. That's the problem, I think. Whereas then for the salmon, it's I know you're like, but step cast. I was saying, Paddy, I saw this great illustration a couple of years ago in one of the Trout and Salmon magazine, and it was a picture of the trout angler brain, and it's all these reference books and Latin terms and all this very complicated stuff, and then salmon angler brain, step cast.
Yeah. But I think really I suppose trout fishing and salmon fishing, there's good technique in either trout fishing or salmon fishing. It's all about really doing simple things, but doing them really well. So if you can do the simple things really well, you're 90% there. But there's the rub. The rub is, and the longer you fish and the more you fish, and the more you learn, the more you see, the more you realize it's just the simple things done well. That success,
But it's time in the water, isn't it, Paddy? Like,
it's time, and it's time spent on building up skills or whatever. So I remember, I think I was listening to one of the podcasts Tom was on about fishing for Canis or whatever. Like, every type of fishing has its own skills. So you get a guy out and he's dry fly fishing in really difficult conditions. So if you have a guy there and he isn't able to cast a line without rocking the boat, well, you're in trouble, So, and you'd say to yourself, well, that should be relatively easy. But at the end of the day, it's simple, but you still have to be able to do it. So the guy that would be into that type of fishing or want to learn that type of fishing, he needs to go away and practice until he can do that. So if you have somebody out in the boat or whatever and they're not able to do that, say, well, that's okay. We were all there once, but you need to go away and practice to do this. So it's the same for salmon. If any particular technique, and if somebody can't do it, it's no big deal. We all have to learn or whatever, but you need to go away and just learn it and just learn to do the simple things really well. And then if you can do that, you're in the game, Can
I ask you, Paddy, what's your thoughts on the kind of more recent developments towards the kind of shorter heads, the shooting head style? Like I've heard of some people kind of, like from my perspective, it's a lot easier for people to take up the kind of salmon casting style, isn't it, with those shorter heads, because you can be casting a good line out in a short amount of time. Like,
I'm a huge fan of short lines in certain situations. So I'm a particular fan of the OPST commando heads. They're actually really, really short. They're only about 15, 18 feet long. And that's because a lot of the places I fish, and a lot of places salmon anglers fish, in Ireland particularly, are spate rivers or small to medium-sized salmon rivers. And a lot of the time we're very, very restricted casting space. But on top of that, we also have to be using sinking tips and heavy flies, and you combine that with not much room to cast. If you have a line that will cope with all those conditions, well, then you're really, really in the game. So that's why I'm a fan of my favorite line for them type of situations is definitely the OPSD commando heads.
Good. Can I ask you, and I ask you this really, and I want to know, why do they work?
Okay, they work because all the weight for the casting is condensed into a much shorter distance, right?
Yeah.
So originally, these lines are what they call micro Skagit lines. So the Skagit lines started to become known in Ireland, I suppose, maybe 10 years ago, and they're originally from the Pacific Northwest in the USA and Canada, and they were used for fishing very, very heavy flies with very, very fast sinking tips. Now, the original, and even nowadays, some of the Skagit lines were very heavy and very clunky. They would land in the water and cause a lot of disturbance. But that has been refined quite a bit. And OPST, who also, Ed Ward is one of the instigator. He was one of the guys that invented the whole Skagit casting style and system or whatever. So he's come up with lines that have refined that whole Skagit system down to that the lines actually are really, really fishable for Atlantic salmon. They don't cause very little disturbance, and they still do all the other things. They still cope with very, very fast sinking tips, T18, T20s, and the heaviest flies we'd possibly use in Ireland. And also you can use them then they're actually very good for fly fishing for pike. You can actually, fish wet flies over the front of the boat with them as well for salmon or trout. So the short heads, they're really good for all those things. They're not very good for dry fly fishing, or they're not very good where you have to be fishing in a big river where you have to be casting 40, 45 yards all day. But for most of our Irish fishing, I'm a big fan of them. They're very, very versatile. And getting back to the guy, the beginner, it gets the beginner fishing very, very quickly, and it helps to give them confidence. So a beginner, it can be a very frustrating process, the whole process of learning to fly cast. So these shorter heads, like these commando heads, get people and build their confidence very, very quickly. And if they want to progress then to casting with longer heads and move into full spay lines, they have a sort of a stepping stone along the way. You can, as you know yourself with fly casting, you can take it to whatever level you want. So, with all the visiting anglers coming to Ireland, the biggest problem I find with a lot of the guys and girls is that when they go back home to their home country, they just don't have the time to practice a lot of the time. And sometimes if they do have the time, they mightn't have the water nearby or the space to do it or whatever. So a lot of them just don't get the time, and the only time they get to fish is when they're actually here. So if you have a sort of a line system that gets them fishing straight away, well, then they're definitely in the game then,
There's a bit of snobbery attached to it though, Paddy, isn't there? Like in terms of
in fly casting, is it? Or?
Yeah, that people kind of look down their noses a bit on the kind of short-haired development. Like, is there?
Well, I wouldn't worry too much. I wouldn't worry too much about that, because some of the best fly casters in the world use them. So I wouldn't let that. I would never let anything get in the way of using something that was the most effective to use in a given situation. So if I was going to fish on some big, massive pool in Norway where I have to be casting 40, 45 yards, well, I wouldn't be using the OPH Commando. But for the majority of my fishing, we'll say, around the west of Ireland, well, I'm quite happy using it. And if I have to use a longer head in a different situation, if I was maybe in the ridge pool in Belnay, I might use a spay line, or I might use a different line. But the ideal thing is to match the line to the situation you're fishing in. Use the most efficient line for a given situation,
Yeah.
And that's the real. And it gets back to the same thing. Keep it simple, keep it easy. You have enough things to contend with without making things hard for yourself. So you don't want to be on a small river in the west of Ireland with a 64-foot head spay line, and all you have out is the tip, and it's not loading the rod, and you're wondering why things aren't working too well.
Yeah.
So you need to match the line to what you're doing and keep it simple and keep it efficient.
Where do you see the next development going in terms of lines or technology, that side of it, like, with tackle? Where does you see it going, or any ideas? Do you see rods getting, in terms of, because even the rod sizes, haven't we seen that they're kind of, we're getting lighter, shorter?
Yeah. So I can remember, when I was very young, starting off with cane rods and silk lines, and I've seen the developments of plastic lines, double tapers, going on to weight forwards and long belly weight forwards and long taper weight forwards, and then the whole progress of lines. I can see this whole emphasis towards lighter and lighter. That'll probably come in and stay more than it is now. Like historically on the lakes, we'll say, a lot of guys using 8 and 9 weights, right? That was and a lot of the time that's all that was available. But that's all changed now. Most guys are fishing 5 and 6 weights, and then a lot of guys are fishing 3 and 4 weights in the lakes. So the same with salmon fishing, it was always 10 weight and 11 weight, 15 foot with big heavy lines. Those days are nearly gone now completely, especially around on the Moy and these places. Most guys are fishing, 7 weights. Not too many even fishing 8 and 9 weights. A lot of fishing 7 weights, and some going down 5 and 6 weights for salmon.
Wow.
Yeah. It's, but in summertime in really low water, now we'll fish in really low, difficult conditions in the Moy. We'll take out a 9-foot trout rod and fish a 5 or 6 weight line off it. If in low water conditions. So that's what you need to be using if things are really difficult.
Yeah.
And the river is really low. You need to be going out with a trout rod and a 5 or 6 weight line and sneaking around. So you just use what matches the conditions you're faced with,
And speaking of conditions, Paddy, just to kind of look ahead, we know in terms of kind of the numbers of salmon, how it's been reduced in the last few years. Going forwards, are you worried about it in terms of salmon numbers? Do you think will we reach bottom? How do you see it going? Like,
yeah, well, I said to Tom there a while ago that I think the grills on the Moy, I have sort of a feeling that it's gradually getting better. The spring one on the Moy and a lot of other rivers is I think probably not nearly as good as it was. And I think at some stage we have to say stop, and we have to say, we have to approach things differently. So, just having, catch and release or whatever up until a certain date in the season doesn't work. Because you could have catch and release on the Moy or some other river around the country, catch and release for spring salmon up until the end of June. even after their season is over. The first flood that comes in July, a lot of those fish will come back on the take and they'll be killed then. So there has to be a better way of doing it. So I would say something like they're doing other countries maybe have a size limit, so something equivalent to a 5-pound grills. Any fish bigger than this has to be released. I think that would work very well. A lot of countries are minding their salmon stocks better than we are in Ireland, and if we don't stop killing as many springfish around the country, well then it's going to end, and so like there's a happy medium. In some rivers, the spring run is in trouble. Other rivers, it's not so much so. All I know that in certain rivers where they brought in total catch and release, rivers that were in really bad trouble, they have come back very well. So it does work. A lot of the problems we have in salmon fishing in Ireland weren't the cause of the anglers. The anglers weren't the cause of bringing the salmon numbers down to where they were. The drift nets and the policies, I suppose the government policies to say that they could trap and net salmon out in their thousands brought the overall numbers of salmon down to a very low level. That wasn't the anglers' fault; it was government policy. But as it stands now, the angler has some say. So I find a lot of people are releasing a lot more salmon. That's very, very welcome. And I think we have to really start thinking about protecting our fish more, because when they're gone, they're gone. And there's, if a river gets down to a certain level, if a certain run of fish in a river gets down to a certain level, it might never recover. And there's certain salmon rivers around that got to that level 30 years ago and they have never recovered. So that can happen to any river anywhere. And it's up to the powers that be to sort of ensure that it doesn't happen around Ireland.
I think that's very true. Very true. Actually, when we're on about it there, Paddy, just that you mentioned, because I wanted to ask you, any idea what's the amount of rod caught salmon on the Moy in a year? I know it's kind of hard to tell.
It can vary. It can vary. So at most years, there's the highest number catch in the country. So most years, we say if there's about 8,000 salmon caught in the Moy, there'll be something roughly around 4,000 caught in the Blackwater as the next best river. But it can vary in the Moy, Anton, between 5,000 up to 10 or 12,000. It can vary from year to year. So if you were in around the 7,000-8,000 would be sort of an average year, and 10 or 11,000 would be a good year, and less than that would be classed as a poor year.
It's phenomenal.
It is, yeah, and a lot of those fish are killed, and whereas we're not at the level of total. It needs to be more fish released, because even though the grillstone is holding up, and even though I think the grillstone is increasing slightly, the angling pressure is starting to build up again. There's a lot more anglers out. The spring run needs to be protected more. So yeah, it's a wild resource, and I think we have a certain duty to our children or to our grandchildren or the people come after us to say that, well, what do we do or what do we say, to protect these fish for the generations to come, we have no God-given right to bring them to a level where they're gone for our children or our grandchildren,
100%. No, 100%, Paddy.
Yeah, very much.
Final question we ask everyone, Paddy, on this is, what was your most memorable fish? Not necessarily the biggest, not your PB.
I was asked that question last year, and I won't mention this guy's name, right? I won't mention this guy's name, but he was actually quite a famous Scottish salmon angler, and he had only a few weeks to live, and he was fishing on the River Eastgate, and he caught his last salmon on the sandhole on Fortland Fishery in Eastgate, and the fish was 14 pounds weight, and he died 2 weeks later. That was it.
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
That was my most memorable fish.
It's a nice memory to have, though.
It was, yeah. It was very special for him, and it was very special for me.
Yeah, it was great that you were there with him for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super. Yeah.
Lovely.
And isn't that what it's like about Paddy, though, isn't it? It's the experiences with the people.
Yeah,
you look back on the fish life,
Yeah, it's salmon fishing, as you know, it's often being said, it means a lot of different things for people, or whatever, and people get different types of enjoyment or different aspects of salmon fishing, and I suppose, as Tom knows, all we can do as fishing guides or whatever is to try and help people enjoy it as much as they can and squeeze every last little bit of enjoyment they can out of it,
Exactly. Make the most of it, as you said.
Make the most of it, yeah, for sure.
Well, Paddy McDonnell, best of luck for the season, and for hopefully more fish and more anglers coming over post-COVID, making the most of it. And thanks again for your time.
Cheers,
thanks,
Paddy.
Guys. All the best.
Our thanks to Paddy McDonnell for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com, as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.